comes to mind when I say gymnastics? Core strength, discipline, and toned physiques. Gymnastics is a dynamic and captivating sport that holds immense importance in the world of athletics and physical fitness. From artistic and rhythmic gymnastics to acrobatics and tumbling, the significance of gymnastics extends beyond its dazzling performances and breathtaking routines. Philadelphia Boys Gymnastics, PBG, is the only high level boys gymnastics club in Philadelphia, and it is a 501c3 nonprofit. I have the celebrated coach, Coach Fred Turoff. His introduction can run into pages, and it would be incorrect for a layperson like me to miss out on any of that. So let's just say Fred has been inducted into the U.S. Gymnastics Hall of Fame as a coach, which is the highest honor a coach can receive from the national governing body. He is a nationally and internationally certified judge. The World Acrobatic Society inducted him into its Gallery of Legends in 2015. And as if that's not enough, he has an instructor's license as a scuba diver, and he has instructed scuba classes at Temple University. Absolute honor to have you on Chezuba Talks, Coach.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Coach Fred, tell us what is the mission and vision of PBG, Philadelphia Boys Gymnastics, and how do you aim to fulfill this mission?
Well, many years back, we had two local boys programs close, and some parents came to talk to me about starting a boys program. At that time, at the university where I was teaching and head coach, we had to set up and tear down a second gym each day because the gym was in use by campus recreation at night. So it had to be clear. But that particular year, campus recreation built another building. And so the gym became available. So when I approached my administration about starting a boys program that would be a fundraiser for the men's team, they said, "Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. Go ahead and do it." And so I was able to have training for boys at night after the men's varsity program had finished. Uh, this stayed in place until 2015. My varsity program had been discontinued uh, the year before, 2014, but I continued to coach the team as a volunteer. And then in 2015, they said, well, we can't have the boys program here at night. We're going to be using the gym for something else. So I found a place in a section of Philadelphia called Germantown. It's 3.5 miles from the university, and moved it there. And we stayed as boys only for quite a while. But then when the pandemic hit and shut many, many things down, including us for 6 months, and the rent didn't stop, uh, and a parent approached me and said, look, I've got some girls' equipment in my basement. Would you like it? And I said, well, sure. That way we can start a
Mhm.
beginning girls program as well. But we are not having a competitive girls program. We're having competitive gymnastics for boys, but we're just
Boys
providing
only.
basic instruction for girls. And so that's how it is today. The girls program, of course, supplements the income and helps to pay the rent and coaches and all the other bills that are associated with running the business. And so we continue on. At the height of our enrollments, we had about 250 kids right before the pandemic. We're approaching 200 again, uh, but it's taken a while to build things back. And we still have our competitive boys program. The competition season in our area runs November through April. So we are preparing the kids, the boys, for competition. In the meantime, trying to teach a lot of beginning gymnastics to encourage some of the younger boys to think about competing later on. And as they get better, we advance them level by level, and they take part in the U.S. program. So
That's wonderful.
it's a nice thing
Lovely.
to see.
Yeah, and you had the support of all the parents and the community, for starting something like this. That's also important
Yeah,
after
and
the COVID.
And another facet of our operation, of course, if we ever make money, is to help support the Temple University men's team, which has to bring in its own money. It's not supported by athletics anymore, and so it's a purely um, uh, program that runs on fundraising.
Hmm.
And we
Hmm.
still compete against other colleges, and so there are plenty of expenses involved in travel, as you can imagine.
Absolutely, I'm sure. The coaching staff at PBG is obviously unique. They have you there and they have people trained by you there. So, how does this diverse coaching team contribute in terms of the development of young gymnasts?
Well,
Everybody gets their own strengths. Yes.
everybody who coaches for me has been a gymnast, and so they know what it's like to learn the basic skills and then progress on. And so it's not that I really have to teach them much, although there are plenty of materials available. And gymnastics coaches share knowledge very easily. None of us harbors secrets. And the same thing
They're
goes, by the
flexible.
way, with my team and another team. I'll have a coach say, "How did you teach that skill?" And I'll tell them how to teach it. It's no problem. So
No
we're a
secrets.
friendly bunch, and that shows in competitions too, because you see the athletes applauding other athletes because they know how
Hmm.
long it takes to learn those skills and how hard it is to perform them. And so the staff that I have, we have occasional meetings just to go over how things are running. But the staff I have is quite competent in teaching beginning skills. And the ones who are teaching the competitors, they've been competitors themselves and maybe have gone through the same sort of program. And so they know that you have to learn this before this, and here's a written routine. You have to do it this way. We when a, there's a clinic, for instance, there was a clinic for Pennsylvania gymnasts held at
Uh-huh.
a nearby uh, gymnastics camp, and a lot of the coaches went, and some of the athletes went, just so that we could share the knowledge and make sure that we're all working toward the same goals.
Hmm. So, what would you say? Do you think gymnastics has come of age today, or do you think there is a lot to learn and there's a lot to progress in? I'm talking about general gymnastics. I'm not talking only about PVG.
Yeah. Well, certainly, Olympics gives gymnastics a very big advertising boost. It's one of the more popular sports seen. And we've got the World Championship in Belgium coming up next week, which I will be attending um, just as an observer. I've had people on that level many years back, and I just make a point of going to see what's happening and watching the best in the world perform. And it's a reunion with many friends that I get to see from around the world. However, um, we uh, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, we were
Hey,
talking about gymnastics today,
oh
and
yeah, okay, yeah. Well, right now Simone Biles is a hot number. So Simone is by far the best female gymnast in the world, and she's American, and so that that's going to get some coverage. Uh, Men's gymnastics doesn't get as much as I would like because there are plenty of other sports for men, and for some reason Uh, there is a thought that gymnastics isn't, let's say, I wouldn't say a manly sport, but because it's amazing how strong you have to be and how flexible you have to be a top gymnast. But there's this conception that uh, you know, the traditional U.S. sports like football, baseball, basketball, those things are more suited to men. But that, which if you compare a gymnast to an athlete of another sport, I would imagine the gymnast is in better physical shape overall because we don't just use our
absolutely, yeah,
legs, we don't just use our arms, we use everything. We have to be
yeah,
strong enough to move our body through space. We have to have the coordination, we have to have the flexibility to make our bodies get into certain positions. Uh, and I would match the physical fitness of a gymnast to any other sport. And
very true. Yes,
for the kids that come in and do basic gymnastics and then decide they want to try another sport, it will help them because they get stronger and more flexible. They learn to put up with frustration, repetition. You don't learn a skill the first time you try it. You might learn it the 100th time you try it. And this is helpful
Right.
not just in sport, but hopefully in the world. And in fact, I have a very wonderful story that a
Mm-hmm.
former gymnast told me. He worked in the banking industry, and he
Mm-hmm.
said that I, when I lose a client, I lose an account or something like that. It's okay with me because I know there's another one. I have another chance.
Right. Right.
Well, I have fellow workers who fall apart because they lost a client. But in gymnastics, you miss a routine, you got the next one to do. You can't think about it. You miss a skill, you get up and you
True.
do it again. So, and he says, gymnastics does teach you much in the real world. And I said, I agree with you.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah,
agree
no,
with you.
very true. Very true. Very true. And with this requirement of, trying again and, falling down and trying again, do you think that today's generation or the youngsters today do not have that much patience? Are you able to identify or pinpoint a certain quality about youngsters?
Well, persistence is an important quality. Once you have a goal, and everything is goals, of course, in the progressive manner of teaching. You have to teach this before you teach this before you teach this. When you skip steps, that's when it becomes dangerous. And people come in and say, I want to learn how to flip. Well, have you ever done a forward roll or a backward roll?
Yeah.
No. Okay, well, you got to do that first. You got to see what it's like to turn over. Then you got to do this. Then you got to do this. And then you have to get strong enough to do a flip. And if you can't master the beginning skills, it would be foolish for you to try a harder skill. And so, gymnastics
Right. I mean,
teaches you that
yeah.
there's a progression that has to be done, and don't skip steps. And you know that you're going to get to this point at some point. And if the coach is good, he'll say, "Well, yeah,
Hmm.
this is like a 6 month goal. It's going to take you that long. You might
Hmm.
learn this in a week or two, but then you're going
Hmm.
to take a little bit longer for this and a little bit longer, and we will get there as long as you're willing to apply yourself and don't get crazy about missing something or not being able to do it for a while. We all have students who just say, I just can't get it. I can't get it. I said, I went through the
You
same.
will.
I went through the
Someday
same.
you will.
It'll have. You keep working at it. It'll work. Just keep working at it.
Yeah. I know, but that takes a lot, isn't it? I mean, with today's, I mean, with this instant gratification, there's so much of pressure, academics and extracurricular activities, and so many other things happening. Mental health, of course. So I think it can be quite a challenge for youngsters today to deal with this. So, do you have more of counseling, or do you have more of practice? How do you work that out?
Now you just keep talking to them and keep being positive. You say that it doesn't work yet, but it will eventually. You don't want to give up. And the same thing applies to most anything that you find outside of the gym. If you have a goal, something you want to accomplish, and it's not working right away, you
Yeah.
either continue working at it, you find another way to work at it. But if it's important to you, don't give it up. Just keep on working.
Right. Right, and that's the difference between a good coach and an average coach, isn't it? So
Well,
being there and counseling.
I, every good coach will do as much to encourage a, a student as well as point out the flaws and try to make the corrections. So, for
Yeah.
instance, if a fellow is, or a young boy, or even a young girl, is making a mistake over and over again, you say,
Hmm.
this is what you want to do, but this is what you're doing. So you have to fix that. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually it comes around. And some of these things are hard to do. Make changes in your
Very true. Yes.
physical approach to something, but it all comes out.
Right.
Let's take a break to understand what Chezuba is. Everyone at some point ponders on how this beautiful life can be made more meaningful. Maybe you're a leader trying to enhance your employees' experience at your organization. Or you already work for the community and seek volunteers with state of the art skills to strengthen your nonprofit. Whatever your situation, know that you can make a difference. Chezuba began with this very vision, a vision to facilitate every skill and every passion in the world in meeting a social need. Corporate volunteering has several benefits for both businesses and organizations. In parallel, experienced and enthusiastic volunteers join NGO workers, enabling them to serve the community more effectively. Chezuba offers everyone looking to add purpose and meaning to their lives a chance to connect or volunteer virtually with nonprofit organizations from over 100 countries around the world. Visit www.chezuba.net and explore opportunities to find meaning. Chezuba, your platform to do good. And now, back with our guest.
Coach Fred, you have had extensive involvement in gymnastics, both as a coach and as an athlete. So, how did you first get introduced to gymnastics, and what then made you, decide to pursue it as a lifelong passion?
Sure. Well, when I was a kid, I used to play all kinds of sports with my friends. I lived on a row home, so we had an alley between the row homes, and we used to play various ball sports in the back and running and track and so on. But I also had a lawn, and I liked to tumble on the lawn. And I used to climb trees all the time, so I wasn't afraid of heights. And so when I was in elementary school, there was a tumbling club that I joined and started learning some of the beginning tumbling skills. When I went to junior high in Philadelphia at that time, this is back in the 50s and 60s, every junior high and every high school had a gym team. And so when I went to junior high, I joined the gym team. And right away, I found I had some success in it. And so I figured, this is what I'm going to do. I'll do this sport. Interestingly, my son had a similar uh, thing happen. We had him involved in a variety of sports when he was a youngster. And one day, probably when he was like 8 or 9, he just said, I want to do gymnastics. And I don't want to do other sports. And he turned out to be a decent gymnast and wound up competing for me at my university. And then when our program was dropped, he transferred to Ohio State and competed for them. And now he's assistant coach at West Point for the men's gymnastics team. So he's found a life in gymnastics, and he got to be very strong. He was known as a really strong ring man. Um, and so he had a good career, and he's still enjoying it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, when you say you decided that you wanted to get into gymnastics, now pursuing this as a career was the first choice, or was it something that came naturally?
Well, actually, when I was a young gymnast in junior high and high school, I didn't have any career ambitions at that point. I just was learning stuff and having fun being a gymnast. But when I went to college, I knew I wanted to be on the gym team, and I was also a physics major, and I studied physics in undergraduate and graduate school. And it was during my time in graduate school when I made the U.S. national team and competed internationally. And at that point, I just thought about it. I said, I enjoy gymnastics more than I am interested in pursuing physics. So I always tell people I prefer people to particles. And
People to particles.
and
Yes.
I was assistant coach at my university for a number of years while I was training. I trained all the way through
Mhm.
age 29. When after a series of injuries, I just said the body's not going to take it anymore. Uh,
Mhm.
and I retired from active training, and 3 months later, the head coach job opened up at my university, and I got hired. And so one of the casualties of that was I thought when I retired, I said, "Oh, now I'll get a chance to try snow skiing." But so they got hired. There went all my weekends in the winter. so so I have never
Yeah,
done
true.
snow skiing,
Well, but
but
that's a
that's
big gain
still
for the
fun.
gymnastics world, isn't it?
And I had a wonderful time being a young coach and just having a great career. And I was a varsity coach for 38 years, and then I stayed on for 3 more years as a volunteer coach for the team. And then one of my
Hmm.
gymnasts who had graduated in 2011 and
Hmm.
hadn't found a job. Uh, I brought him up because some friends of mine in South Africa contacted me and said, "We're looking for someone to coach our advanced gymnasts." And I approached my former student and said, "Hey, here's an interesting job." And he went for 6 months and stayed for 5 years. And when he came back to the U.S.,
Okay.
when he came back to the U.S., he said he'd like to get into college coaching. So at that point, I said, "You be my assistant this year, and next year we'll switch." And, so he's the head coach
Wow,
now.
that's
I'm his assistant. Yep, yep.
wow. That's
So
so humble of you. I mean, you would look at this. So that just goes to show, right? In sports, there's no, um, you know, assistant, and there is no hierarchy, so to say.
yeah, yeah. Just well, it worked out well that he was there and he enjoyed his coaching enough that he wanted to come back and do more coaching. And so it just
Right.
worked out well, and it keeps me in the
Right.
gym. I'm still teaching a course at Temple
Hmm.
University in gymnastics. In fact, last year I taught two, and this year I gave him one of them so that I could kind of transition out.
Hmm. Yeah, great. So you mentioned this about having exposed your son to a variety of sports, and then he zeroed in on gymnastics. Do you think that's the right way to expose children? Do you think that children should be exposed to all sorts of sports, and what is the age that is right, appropriate for them to be exposed to all sports, and then finally decide on this is what I would like to do.
Well, I think exposing a young person to a variety of sports is good because they may find that they have, an affinity for one over the other. We didn't push our son at all into gymnastics, but as soon as he got into the community, and same thing with my wife, she didn't know uh, anything about gymnasts prior to marrying me, and then she realized that actually it's a pretty nice community. There are a lot of nice people in it, and they're not stupid jocks. Uh, and she was very happy that her son was involved in the sport.
Right.
But getting back to your question, if children are exposed to a variety of them and they happen to find one that they like better, then let them pursue that. And
Let them pursue that.
if
Yes.
they find success in it, fine. If they find after a while they don't care for it, they've at least had the experience to try other sports. And if they want to stay in
Right.
sports, they have a variety of choices. For
Right.
someone who's
So
going to
this
be
can
slow like
happen.
me, it's not,
Mm-hmm.
even though I played basketball when I was young, it's
Mm-hmm.
impractical for me to be a basketball player. I'm 5 feet 2 inches tall, and everybody in that's about where their knees and shoulders are in basketball. So it wouldn't be practical for
Right.
me to do that. Yeah.
Right. Obviously, yes, yes, absolutely. Coach Fred, you have a textbook called Artistic Gymnastics, and it has been adopted as a coaching manual by the U.S. Junior Boys Program. Uh, could you share a few insights into the key principles and teachings that you have covered in your book?
Well, the book is focused on beginner and advanced beginner skills. It would take me centuries, it seems, to cover everything that is being done these days, or at least decades, maybe not centuries, but still, I
Yeah,
wanted to I
just a
wanted to
few.
provide
Yes.
a good basis for not just gymnasts to look at or coaches to look at, but parents. Parents could look at it and see
Mm-hmm.
what their kids are learning. And so it
Mm-hmm.
was a 5 year project for me. I wound up hanging gray paper on the wall so I'd have a plain background in our gym, and having some of our gymnasts uh, de- be demonstrators, and having kids from local clubs come in so I could show that little kids can learn this as well as big kids. I also had men coaching women and women coaching men, or what I should say, men coaching girls and women coaching boys, um,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can see that it doesn't matter what sex you are, you can still teach beginning gymnastics. Uh, and it wound up being a pretty comprehensive book. I illustrated it with many sequence photos. There are over 140 skills demonstrated there in sequence photos. So there were over 1,400 photos in the book that show
Okay. The
how to do
technique.
something, and what we call how to spot it, meaning how you might assist to help someone
Mm-hmm.
get the feeling of the move and how you would be there in case of a mistake. You're there as a safety factor as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it was missing in our literature, got it done,
Mm-hmm.
and that was enough.
Lovely. Of course, it's going to be an invaluable guide to everybody. Do you have any advice for aspiring gymnasts and coaches who are looking to excel in the world of gymnastics, considering your extensive experience and expertise?
Well, everybody can excel to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
There some who are gifted physically will progress faster than others, and I can think of some of the
Right.
gymnasts that I've worked with, or even some of the top gymnasts in the country,
Right.
and I know this one was more talented than this other one because of the way they would learn. There are a couple of people that just they seem to learn things right away, whereas I would have struggled for a
Mm-hmm.
while. But no matter what you do, whether it's gymnastics or whether it's art or playing an instrument or doing another sport, if you want to excel to the highest potential that you have to be dedicated to it. You have to deal with frustration.
Dedication.
You have to be able to listen. You have to be able to make changes, and you'll find that quite rewarding. Just the fact that when you learn a new skill, that's a wonderful reward for you. I can finally do
Mm-hmm.
something that I've worked at for quite a while, and then you get a
Yeah.
chance to show it off if you're competing. And if you do
Absolutely,
it better
yes.
than somebody else, it will be noticed. That sort of thing.
Right. So
Just
dedication
a whole
is
other area.
one major quality. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, and lastly, beyond gymnastics, you have a passion for scuba diving and underwater photography. Can you share some of your most memorable underwater experiences, or maybe a photography subject that you have underwater?
sure. Well, my favorite area to go in the world is the called the Triangle of Biodiversity, which is the area around Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Philippines. That's where you have the greatest variety of species of corals and fish. I was in Philippines this past May. I'm going to Indonesia in April. Uh, but there are things to see all over. I spent most of my early years as a scuba diver, starting back in 1986 in the Caribbean, because it was the closest, until I said, well, now it's time to see other parts of the world. And so each part has its own wonderful things to see. Just a year ago, well, less than a year ago, I was in the Grand Bahama area and I was diving with tiger sharks. Those are pretty big sharks, and the people who took us on the trip knew how to handle them. And so I had tiger sharks swim within 1 meter of me. Fortunately, they weren't hungry, and didn't have to worry. I didn't have to worry about it, but I got a whole variety of nice shots of that. When I was in the
Lovely.
Philippines, I had things. We dove with thresher sharks, which are the sharks with the very long tails, and we were in an area where they were calm and we were calm, and they would swim relatively close to us, so we had a chance to get some wonderful pictures. But those are all big things. We also swam with whale sharks, which are the biggest fish in the ocean, and these whale sharks were medium size, only maybe 20 to 25 feet long, and they can get to be
Wow.
about 40 feet. Uh, so
Mm-hmm.
that was a wonderful scuba experience to be able to spend time underwater and have these sharks swim nearby. But there are also tiny things. Yeah, you run the entire gamut of creatures that are maybe this big to a whale shark. And with photography, the closer you are, the better the colors, because you always, unless you are not allowed to use flash, you always have
Mm-hmm.
strobes with you to supply the sunlight. Because as you go down in the water absorbs colors. By the time you're
Right.
down at 40 feet, 50 feet, everything is blue.
Everything's black, blue.
Well, that's really deep. I don't think that the limit for sports scuba diving is 40 meters or 130 feet. And I
Okay.
haven't been that deep. There's plenty to see that's higher up. But when you have your strobes with you and you take that picture, boom, all of a sudden you see the real colors for an instant.
Mm.
And of course, when you look at the photo, then you see the real colors. And the closer you are, the less stuff in the water is between you and the camera, so your pictures are clear. So taking what's called macro photography, when you get very small things and you're getting real close, that gives you the best colors. And I have seen just marvelous, marvelous tiny creatures. Something's hiding everywhere. When you go to a coral reef,
So,
something
yeah,
is in every little nook and cranny. And if you take
true.
your time, you can find some pretty amazing little creatures. And they're all delicate because in the water, it's not like they're in air and gravity has an effect on how big we can get. In the water, you don't weigh as much. That's why you can get to be a blue whale, which is the biggest creature that has ever lived on the ocean, or the planet, I should say. And and you go all the way down to the tiniest of creatures that might be only a millimeter or two, yet their structures are beautiful, and you can see just from corals
Yeah, the
how they can
wonders of nature.
branch everywhere because they don't worry about weight. Yeah,
True, true.
yeah.
Well, that's lovely. It has been lovely talking to you. Thank you, Fred, Coach Fred, for sharing all these insights about gymnastics, about mental health, and about nature and valuing and uh, making sports a part of your life. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thanks for having me.
It is clear PBG is not just about gymnastics, it is about building character, instilling discipline, and fostering a spirit of giving back to the community. So, as you vault into the future, I'd like to remind listeners that gymnastics is not just shaping bodies, it is sculpting futures, one somersault at a time.